My name is Priscilla Trent, and I was 71 the night my daughter-in-law slid a deed across my husband's dinner table. She smiled when she did it. "Sign it, Mom," she said. "You won't need the house much longer." For 6 months, I had let my family believe my mind was going. I let them hide my glasses. I let them say I forgot things over and over in front of company. There was a reason I stayed quiet, and it was not weakness. None of them knew about the quiet trip I'd made to a lawyer's office months earlier, or the calls that came after it. They did not know who else I had invited to that table. 10 minutes after my son's wife set down that deed, my own son could not meet my eyes. And he still can't. Welcome back to Alpha Mom Stories. Quiet stories about women who were underestimated until the day they weren't. If your family ever decided your whole life behind your back, this one is for you. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. Walter built our house with his own hands the year we married, back in 1976. He was a carpenter then. He made our dining table from a single white oak that came down in a storm the spring before. Nearly 50 years that table has held our life. Sunday dinners, tax season paperwork stacked in piles, my granddaughter's first birthday cake, candles and all. I built things too. After Walter's heart attack 2 years ago, people expected me to fold. I didn't. I had already spent 30 years running a small accounting practice off Route 9, doing the books and the taxes for half the shops in town, and I knew the weight of a number better than I knew my own face. Numbers don't lie to you. People do. I'm not a dramatic woman. I never have been. Walter used to say I could read a foreclosure notice and a love letter with the same flat expression, and he meant it as a compliment. I tell you about the table because everything that happened there. The deed, the silence. The moment my family learned they had misjudged the quiet woman at the head of it. For a long time, I thought the worst night of my life was the night I buried Walter. I was wrong about that. The worst was a Tuesday in October, at my own birthday dinner, when I finally understood what my family had been planning while they smiled at me across that oak. My son Daniel married Megan 4 years ago. She was his second wife, younger, polished, the kind of pretty that checks itself in every window she passes. At first I liked her. She brought casseroles. She called me Mom by the 3rd visit. Then the small things started. My reading glasses went missing off the kitchen counter, where I always set them beside the fruit bowl, and turned up 2 days later in a junk drawer I never use. "Mom, you forgot again," Megan said, holding them out like a nurse with a pill. Her voice was gentle. The gentleness was the part that bothered me. I had set those glasses by the fruit bowl every night for 9 years. I do not forget the fruit bowl. "You don't have to keep track of everything anymore," she said. "That's what we're here for." She squeezed my hand. Daniel looked at his phone the whole time, the way a man does when he has decided not to see something. I thanked her. I always thanked her. That is its own kind of armor, a thank you. People stop watching a woman they believe is grateful. I went to bed that night, turning one small fact over and over in the dark. I knew exactly where I had left those glasses, by the fruit bowl, same as always. So either I was losing my mind on a very precise schedule, or someone in my house had a reason to move them. Here is what the house meant. It was not square footage. It was Walter's hands in every door frame, his pencil mark still inside the closet where he measured the children's heights. It was also the only thing I had left to give Hannah, my granddaughter, Daniel's girl from his first marriage, 23 now, the one nobody else in that family seemed to remember at Christmas. So when the forgetting started, it frightened me more than it should have. Maybe they were right. Maybe 71 was the year the lights began to dim. I would misplace a word, lose 10 minutes, find the milk sitting in the pantry. For 3 weeks, I lay awake wondering if I was the problem. Then the bookkeeper in me woke up. I had balanced other people's ledgers for 40 years. I knew the difference between a mistake and a pattern, and what I was living through had the clean shape of a pattern somebody else was drawing. A mistake is random. This was not random. The glasses, the misplaced milk, the dropped words, they happened on days Megan had been in my house, never on the days she hadn't. I said nothing, not yet. But I started keeping my eyes open, and I started asking myself a different question entirely. Was I losing my mind, Or was someone working very hard to convince the world that I was? Megan's mother was named Carol Devlin. She started coming around that summer, more and more, until her car in my driveway stopped surprising me. Carol had opinions. She delivered them softly, the way some people deliver a knife. You have to plan for these things early, she told Megan over coffee in my kitchen, not bothering to lower her voice. Before the mind goes. After that, it's a legal nightmare. They both glanced at me. I kept stirring my tea. We just want what's best for her, Megan said. Of course you do, Carol answered. A week later, I missed a doctor's appointment I was certain I had never made. The clinic called the house. Mrs. Trent, you're marked as a no-show for your memory evaluation. Memory evaluation. I had scheduled no such thing. I asked Daniel about it. He shrugged and said maybe I had booked it and forgotten, which was, of course, the perfect thing for him to say. But appointments do not appear out of thin air. Somebody had made that one, in my name, and somebody had made sure I would miss it. I hung up the phone and stood very still in my kitchen for a long minute. The tea had gone cold in my hands, and for the first time, I let myself believe I was not the one losing track of things. I called the clinic back the next morning. I asked the front desk to read me the file out loud. A pleasant young woman told me the appointment had been booked 3 weeks earlier, by phone, by a woman who had given my name and my date of birth. And it was canceled, she added, the day before. Same caller. Did the caller sound like me? I asked. A pause. I couldn't say, ma'am, but she had your insurance number. My insurance number lives in a folder in my desk. Megan had been in that desk in September, helping me organize my bills. I thanked the young woman and set the phone down with both hands because my hands wanted to shake and I would not let them. This was no longer a feeling. This was a fact with a paper trail. Someone had built a no-show on a memory test in my name so that, when the time came, there would be a record. A record that said the old woman could not be trusted to keep her own appointments. The kind of record you hand to a judge. I was being framed for losing my mind. I made myself a fresh cup of tea. I drank it slowly all the way down, and then I sat at the oak table and started, very quietly, to plan. The first thing I did was the thing they would least expect. I made an appointment of my own that none of them knew about. Not at the clinic they had touched. A different practice, in Brentwood, 30 miles east, where nobody had ever heard the name Trent. I drove myself. I have been driving since I was 16, and I was not about to stop because my daughter-in-law would prefer that I did. Dr. Lillian Aronson was younger than my reading glasses. She ran me through everything. Memory, reasoning, the clock test where you draw the hands at 10 past 11. I drew them perfectly. I always could. Any particular reason you came in today? She asked. My family thinks I'm slipping, I said. I would like a professional opinion, in writing. She studied me for a moment, then nodded like she had seen this exact thing before, more times than she cared to. We'll run the full battery, she said. And yes, you'll get it in writing. I did not tell Daniel. I did not tell Megan. I did not tell a living soul. For the first time in months, I felt something other than fear. I felt like myself again. A woman with a plan and the patience to run it slowly. I still did not know how far they meant to take this, so I kept driving home that road, and I kept quiet, and I waited to find out. The results came in a plain envelope 9 days later. I read them at the oak table with a cup of coffee going cold beside me. Cognition intact, memory above average for age, no indication of decline. I read it twice. Then I laughed, one short surprise sound in an empty house. My mind was fine, better than fine, which meant every forgotten appointment, every vanished pair of glasses, every gentle, "You forgot again, Mom," had been a performance. And I was the only one in the cast who had not been handed a script. The relief lasted about a minute. Then the cold came back, colder than before, because a clean test answered one question and opened a far worse one. If I was not losing my mind, then someone in my family was lying about it on purpose. To my doctor, to me, and eventually to a court. People do not fake an old woman's dementia for sport. They do it for something specific, something they want and cannot ask for out loud. I folded the letter and tucked it into my desk, in a place Megan would never think to look. Then I sat with the question that would run my life for the next several months. What exactly did they want? And how far were they willing to go to take it? After that, I became a very good listener. The kind nobody notices is listening. I had learned long ago that people say the truest things when they believe you have stopped understanding them. So I let them believe it. I would shuffle a little, repeat a question once, let a sentence trail off and watch Megan finish it for me, pleased with herself. And I listened. One afternoon, I was resting on the porch with the window cracked behind me. Megan and Carol were in my kitchen, going through my cabinets like they already held the keys. "The facility wants a deposit to hold the room," Megan said. "There's a wait list." "Then pay it," Carol said. "The sooner she's settled, the sooner the rest can move." The rest? I did not yet know what that meant, but I knew the word facility, and I knew there was a room in it now with my name floating somewhere on a list. I lay there with my eyes shut and my heart steady, counting the seconds the way I used to count receipts at closing. Then Megan said something that made the steady heart stutter once. "She won't fight it," she said. "By the time she understands what's happening, it'll already be done." I understood plenty. They simply did not know that yet. And now I had two new things to chase. Which facility, and how far along they already were. My son was not a cruel man. He was a frightened one. And a frightened man is easy to steer if you know which way he is already tipping. Daniel had opened a restaurant in 2022. By spring of this year, it was bleeding money. By summer, it had closed its doors for good. I knew, because the mail still found its way to me sometimes. Forwarded statements. A collections notice he had used my address for years ago and never bothered to change. One envelope I did not open. I did not have to. The return address was a lender, and the words, "Past due," showed through the little window in red. He came by that week looking gray. He sat at the oak table and turned his coffee cup in slow, anxious circles. "Mom," he said, "if anything ever happened to you, the house, would it come to me?" I asked him why he wanted to know. "I just don't want us to lose everything," he said. He would not look up from the cup. "That's all." There it was. Not greed, exactly. Drowning. My son was drowning, and my house was the nearest thing in reach that floated. I told him we would talk about it later. Then I drove home thinking about how much a drowning man will grab for and about who had taught him to reach for me. I found Ruth Calloway through the Bar Association, not through anyone who knew my family. She'd practiced elder law for 26 years and had a handshake like a car door closing. I told her everything. The glasses, the phantom appointment, the facility on a wait list. She did not gasp. She took notes. "What you're describing has a name," she said. "Undue influence. And the deed talk you overheard. That's usually the last step, not the first." She explained how it works. A pattern of decline gets documented. A petition for guardianship gets filed. And once a court hands someone control of you, they can sell the house right out from under your feet. "Though the cheaper route is to get you to sign it over yourself," she added, "while you're frightened enough to doubt your own name. The dementia file is just the backup for the day you refuse." She set down her pen. "And here's what they haven't thought through. A deed signed by a woman they've spent 6 months calling senile is a deed any judge can tear up. They're building the very thing that would undo their own sale." "How do I stop it?" I asked. "You make the house impossible to take," she said, "quietly before they move. I'm telling you this part slowly because most people never learn it until it is too late. If you have a parent living alone, ask them one thing this week. Ask them where their deed is and who can sign in their name. The quiet stuff is where it always starts. If this is helping you, hit subscribe and stay with me. The part you'll want to hear is coming. Ruth slid a yellow legal pad across her desk, uncapped her pen, and started to draw me a way out. 2 weeks later, I signed the house into an irrevocable trust. Not a will, not a maybe. A locked door with Hannah's name on the far side of it. Ruth explained the difference until I could have explained it back to her in my sleep. A will can be contested. A trust, done right and done early, holds. Once it's irrevocable, it isn't yours to give away anymore, she said, and it isn't theirs to take. That, I said, is exactly the point. We did it in June, on a Tuesday, in her office that smelled like old paper and lemon polish. I named Hannah as the beneficiary and Ruth as the trustee, so that no one could ever lean on a grieving girl to sign something away later. I did not slam a single door. I did not raise my voice. I just signed my name in the right order on the right pages before anyone thought to stop me. Then I drove home, made dinner, and said nothing at all. For months, I carried it like a smooth stone in my coat pocket. They believed the house was a ripe apple waiting to fall into their hands. They did not know I had already picked it and put it somewhere their fingers could not reach. All I had to do now was wait for them to reach. They pressed harder after that, the way people press when they think a deadline is coming. Megan started saying it out loud. Mom really shouldn't be alone in this big house. She would say it to Daniel, to Carol, to the mailman if he stood still long enough. She reorganized my linen closet without asking. She labeled my pill organizer in black marker. She started answering my telephone. Because the ringing confuses you, Mom. Each thing was small. Each small thing went into the file. One Sunday, she left a brochure on my oak table. Glossy. A photo of silver-haired women laughing over watercolor paints. Maple Ridge Senior Living, where life keeps blooming. Oh, I must have left that here, she said, making no move to take it back. I picked it up and read every word with my reading glasses, which had mysteriously stayed put for a whole week. A studio room, meals included, $2,900 a month plus a deposit to hold the unit. I set it down, smiled, and said it looked very nice. Inside, I was doing arithmetic. A deposit meant a number. A number meant a paper somewhere with a signature on it. And papers, I was learning, were the one thing my family kept forgetting I could still read. I found it on the first Saturday in October. Megan had come for lunch and left her tote bag on the bench by the door. The canvas one, the one she carried everywhere. She stepped into the yard to take a call. I was meant to be resting. I'm not proud of what I did next. I'm not sorry either. Inside the bag, under her sunglasses, was a folder. Maple Ridge Senior Living, the cover read. I carried it to the oak table and opened it. Page 1 was a pre-admission hold. Signed. Not by me. By Megan. Listed as my responsible party. Pending guardianship, the form said. Page 2 was a deposit receipt. $2,000 paid in September to hold the room. Page 3 is the one I will never forget. It was a move-in schedule, and at the top, in plain black ink, was a target date, November the 4th. They had already chosen the day I would leave my own house. They had picked it, put money down on it, and penciled me in like a dental cleaning, all on the bet that a judge would sign over the rest. I put every page back exactly as I had found it. I closed the bag. I sat down at Walter's table. My hands were perfectly still. That surprised me. I had expected them to shake, and instead they just rested on the wood, calm as the oak itself. Less than a month. That was all the time I had left, and now I knew, down to the date, exactly what I was fighting. The easy thing would have been to confront her right there, wave the folder, scream the house down around her ears. I didn't. A scream is just a sound. It fades, and a woman who screams at her family earns a fresh line in the file, agitated, paranoid, combative, which was exactly the woman they needed me to become. So I made a colder choice. I decided to let them reach for the house in front of witnesses and to be holding the truth in my own 2 hands when they did. If I exposed them in private, it would be my word against theirs. And they had already spent 6 months making sure my word was worth less than it should be, but in front of people they could not dismiss. With papers they could not argue with? That was a different table entirely. I thought about my birthday, the 24th, 11 days before their move-in date. Megan had already offered to host it. Here, where you're comfortable, Mom. Of course she had. She wanted me comfortable and seated and surrounded by family on the night she made her move. So I would let her host it. I would let her reach. I simply intended to choose a few of the guests myself. Megan was not the only woman in this family who knew how to plan a dinner. There was one more thing I needed to know. How deep had they already dug? The answer came from the mail again. My old curse and that month my best friend. A letter arrived addressed to Daniel at my house. A real estate brokerage. I have run a business. I know a listing packet the moment I hold one. I steamed it open. Yes, I did. Walter would have laughed out loud. Inside was a listing agreement for my address, my house, already signed by Daniel and Megan both, dated 3 weeks earlier, asking price, $420,000. A 6% commission, penciled in at the bottom. They had listed a house they did not own. A second page was a copy of something worse, a short-term bridge loan, $90,000 taken out by Daniel against the pending sale of family property. It was not a real bank. It was the kind of hard money lender who funds in a week and reads the title later at an interest rate that would make a loan shark wince. Daniel had been exactly that desperate. $90,000. He had borrowed against my home to plug the hole in his. So that was the rest. Not only my eviction, my equity, spent before the ink on my move-in date, had a chance to dry. I sat with the numbers the way I had sat with 10,000 others, calm, methodical, adding up exactly how much they stood to lose on the day they discovered the house was already gone. The number was large. The fall, I thought, was going to be something to see. In the middle of all that paper, a good thing happened. Hannah came home. My granddaughter had been away at nursing school in the city, scraping by on student loans and double shifts. Megan had spent years making sure she felt unwelcome at family things. Daniel's daughter, she would call her, never ours. Hannah turned up on my porch one Thursday with a grocery bag and tired eyes. I had a feeling I should check on you, she said. We made soup. We sat at the oak table. She told me about her clinical rotations and about a patient who reminded her of Walter. You always listen to me, she said. You're the only one who ever asked what I wanted. I almost told her everything right then. I didn't. A girl working night shifts to pay for her own future should not have to carry her grandmother's war on top of it. But I looked at her across that table, at the very spot where the deed would soon sit, and something settled in my chest. I was not only protecting a house, I was protecting the one person in this family who had never once asked me for it. Stay for cake on the 24th, I told her. My birthday. I'd like you there. She did not know what she was about to witness. Neither did the others. But I wanted her in that room when it happened. Megan called it a special birthday dinner. She used the word special twice, which is how I knew it had nothing to do with the birthday. Just family, she said. And maybe your friend Nell, if she's up for it, keep it small. Small sounds lovely, I said. Then I made 2 phone calls of my own. The first was to Nell Briggs. Nell is 70, has lived next door since 1981, and has never once believed a single word out of Megan's mouth. I told Nell only this: come to my birthday, sit where I tell you to sit, and watch. The second call was to Ruth. I think it'll happen at my dinner, I told her. The 24th. They'll bring a document. I would like you there when they do. As your attorney? Ruth asked. As my guest, I said, wearing your attorney face. She was quiet for a moment. Then she laughed, low and dry. I'll bring the file, she said. So the table was set in more ways than one. Megan believed she had invited a frightened old woman and a harmless neighbor to sit and watch her win. She did not know I had quietly added one more chair. And she had no idea what the woman in it would be carrying when the deed finally came out. 9 days to my birthday. Everyone was bringing something. Only one of us had already read the other's papers. The morning of the 24th, I got up at 6 and made my own preparations. I ironed the blue dress Walter always liked. I set the oak table myself. The good plates, the cloth napkins from the cedar drawer. I baked a yellow cake, because yellow cake is Hannah's favorite. Then I sat down with a folder. It was a plain cream-colored folder, the kind I had used for clients for 30 years. Inside it, in order, I placed 4 things. Dr. Aronson's report. Cognition intact, memory above average for age. The trust documents signed and stamped in June. The Maple Ridge admission agreement with the move-in date of November 4th. And the listing agreement with the $90,000 bridge loan stapled behind it, Daniel's signature in blue. 4 pages. That was my whole defense. Not a single shout anywhere in any of them. I closed the folder and set it on the sideboard under a stack of birthday napkins where it would wait its turn. Somewhere across town, Megan was no doubt sliding her own document into her own folder, pleased with herself, certain of how the evening would go. 2 women, 2 folders, 1 oak table between them. She thought she was bringing the only papers that mattered to that dinner. She had no idea I had spent 6 months building a quieter, heavier file, and that tonight, at last, I was going to open it. They arrived at 6. Daniel first, looking like a man walking toward a sentencing. Then Megan, in a dress too nice for casserole night, carrying a slim leather folder she set beside her chair like a second-place setting. Carol came with wine and a tight smile. Nell came with a casserole and a wink only I could catch. Hannah came last, in scrubs, straight off a shift. And Ruth. Ruth arrived at 6:15, Mom's friend from her church group, which made Megan blink, recover, and pour her a glass of red. We sat. Walter's table held all of us, the way it always had. Before the food was even served, the performance began. "Mom's been having a hard time lately," Megan told the table, soft and sorrowful. "We're all just so worried about her. I know some of you are waiting for me to lose my temper here, to stand up and shout. I didn't. The calmest person at that table was the one about to win, and I want you to remember that because it is the whole point of this story. If that's the kind of evening you came for, hit subscribe and stay with me. We're almost there." I folded my hands in my lap and let her talk. The leather folder by her chair caught the light from the candles. It built the way these things always build, slowly, then all at once. Megan started with stories. The time I left the stove on, which I hadn't. The time I forgot Daniel's birthday, though I had mailed a card. Each one polished smooth, each one offered up for the benefit of the room. Carol nodded along like a backup singer. "It's so hard to watch," she sighed. "A woman who used to be so sharp." Nell opened her mouth. I touched her knee under the table. "Not yet." Hannah frowned. "Grandma seems completely fine to me," she said. "You're not here enough to see it, sweetheart," Megan said, smiling. Then Megan set down her fork. She looked at me with that gentle, terrible patience she had been practicing for half a year. "You're not well, Mom," she said. "Everyone can see it." The table went quiet. "Everyone can see it," as though my mind were a stain on a blouse that the whole family had been too polite to mention. I did not argue. Arguing was the trap. I simply asked in my flattest bookkeeper's voice whether we might eat before the cake got warm. A few people laughed, relieved. Megan did not. She reached for her folder instead. She thought the silence in that room belonged to her. It didn't. It was the particular silence right before a long column of numbers finally comes out even. Then Megan opened her folder. She slid a single document across the oak table, past the gravy boat, past my untouched plate. It came to rest in front of me, and a pen lay across the top of it, angled toward my hand like an invitation. I looked down. A quitclaim deed. My name typed on the grantor line, a blank space where my signature was supposed to go. "We've talked it over as a family," Megan said, warm as a heated blanket. "It's just easier this way. You sign the house over to Daniel and me, and we handle everything. The taxes, the upkeep, all of it. And Maple Ridge," Carol added helpfully. "They have your room already." Daniel stared down at his plate. Hannah's fork stopped in midair. Nell's hand found mine beneath the table and held on. Megan smiled and tapped the deed once with one manicured finger. "Sign it, Mom," she said. "You won't need the house much longer." The room went still. The kind of still where you can hear the refrigerator hum 2 rooms away. Every face was turned to me, waiting for the old woman to pick up the pen, or to cry, or to crumble into the chair. I did none of those things. I set down my fork. I reached up very slowly, and I drew my reading glasses out of the pocket of my blue dress. My reading glasses. The same ones that had gone missing for 6 months. The ones Megan had handed back to me a dozen times, with that nurse's pity in her voice. I unfolded them. I put them on. I read the deed from top to bottom, slowly, the way I had read 10,000 documents before it. "Well," I said, "you've spelled my name right, at least." A nervous laugh somewhere down the table. Megan's smile thinned at the edges. "Mom, you don't have to read it," she said. "We've handled all of that for you." "I'm sure you have," I said, "but it turns out I can read just fine tonight. Funny how these glasses turned up." I set the deed down. Then I stood, walked to the sideboard, and lifted the stack of birthday napkins. Underneath lay a plain cream folder. "Before I sign anything," I said, carrying it back to my chair, "I'd like to show the table a few papers of my own, since we're all sharing documents over dinner." I sat. I opened the folder. 3 seats down, Ruth set her wine glass on the cloth and quietly folded her hands. Megan looked at the folder, then at me, and something behind her eyes began, slowly, to understand. Not all of it, just enough to be afraid. "What is that?" she asked. "Page 1, I said, and I lifted it up into the candlelight. "Page 1 is from Dr. Lillian Aronson in Brentwood," I said. "A full cognitive evaluation, done in May, at my request." I read the line aloud. "Cognition intact, memory above average for age, no indication of decline." I looked up over the rims of my glasses. So when Megan says everyone can see I'm not well, I'd like the record to show that a doctor looked and found a perfectly sound mind. Carol's smile slid off her face entirely. Daniel finally lifted his head. "Page 2, I said. I laid it down on the table right beside the deed Megan had brought. "This is a trust. I signed it in June. The house, Walter's house, went into it that day. It is no longer mine to give to anyone." Megan's mouth opened. You can't." "I already did," I said. "You cannot transfer what I no longer own, and the beneficiary is Hannah." Hannah's hand flew to her mouth. Across the table, my granddaughter started to cry, and for once it was the good kind of crying. "The house was never on the market for you to take," I went on, steady as a closed ledger. "It has been spoken for since summer." The leather folder sat forgotten beside Megan's plate. Her great document, her quitclaim deed, was now just a sheet of paper about a house that was not mine to sign away. And I was not finished. There were still 2 more pages in my folder. "You're probably wondering about the phone call," I said, "the one I made before tonight." Megan had gone very pale. Daniel had gone very quiet. The whole table leaned in a fraction. "I called Ruth Calloway," I said. "My attorney. She's sitting right there, by the way, not from my church group." Ruth lifted her wine glass an inch. "Good evening," she said. The color left Carol's face in slow stages. "But that was not the only call I made," I said. "I also called the county. Adult Protective Services takes a real interest in certain things. Phantom medical appointments booked in an old woman's name, glasses that vanish on a schedule, a deposit paid on a nursing home she never once agreed to enter." I turned a page without hurrying. They open a file when they hear about things like that. They opened one last week. "Mom." Daniel's voice cracked on the single word. "What did you do?" "Nothing yet," I said. "Mostly I've just been reading." I slid page 3 out from behind page 2. Megan's hand shot toward her own folder and stopped, too late. "This one," I said. "I found in your tote bag, Megan. The canvas one. The first Saturday in October." The table held its breath as one. "You'll want to see it," I said. "It has a date on it." I laid the Maple Ridge folder on the oak table, on the very same wood where Megan had slid me the deed not 5 minutes before. "This is a pre-admission hold for Maple Ridge Senior Living," I said. "Signed in September, not by me, by Megan, as my responsible party, pending a guardianship she was sure a judge would grant." I turned the page. "This is a deposit receipt, $2,000, paid the same week to hold the room." I turned another. "And this is the target move-in date." I lifted my glasses, the ones they all swore I kept losing, and I read the date in plain black ink. November 4th, 11 days from tonight. The day they expected a court to make it legal. I set it down and looked at Megan across Walter's table. "You told me I wouldn't need the house much longer," I said. "And you were right. You had already picked out the very day I'd leave it." Nobody moved. Hannah was crying openly now. Nell's grip on my hand was iron. Carol stared at the deposit receipt as if it might rise up off the table and bite her. "You went into my doctor's office," I said. "My desk, my insurance file. You booked a memory test in my name, so you'd have a no-show to waive in front of a judge. And then you reserved me a studio apartment with a deposit 11 days out before you ever said one honest word to my face." Megan's chin came up. The gentle mask was gone now. What sat behind it was harder and colder and at long last honest. "It's for your own good," she said. "You're old, Priscilla. Somebody in this family had to make the hard choices." It did not escape me that she had stopped calling me Mom. "Somebody did make them," I said. "In June." "Now," I said. "The number." I laid the last 2 pages down on the table. Page 4 was the listing agreement. Page 5 was the loan. "You listed this house 3 weeks ago," I said, "at $420,000, 6% to the broker. You signed it, Daniel. So did Megan." Daniel made a small sound like a man who has stepped off a curb that wasn't there. "And this," I said, tapping the final page, "is a bridge loan, $90,000, borrowed by my son against the pending sale of a house that was already sitting inside a trust before either of you ever called a broker." I folded my hands on the wood. "You borrowed $90,000 against a house you do not own and cannot sell. The collateral was never yours to pledge. When the lender confirms the title, and Ruth tells me that takes a day or two, that $90,000 comes due with absolutely nothing standing behind it." I let that settle. "The trust has been public record since June," I said. "A title search costs $40 and an afternoon. Not one of you ran it. You were all so busy proving I couldn't think that none of you stopped to look." That was when Megan broke. She stood so fast her chair tipped over backward and hit the floor. "You scheming old—" She caught herself, but only just. "You'd do this to your own son? You'd ruin us? Over a house?" Her voice climbed the walls of Walter's dining room. The heated blanket was gone. What came out of her now was raw and loud and ugly. I did not raise mine. I did not need to. "I didn't list the house, Megan," I said quietly. "I didn't borrow against it. I didn't book the nursing home or hide the glasses or call the doctor in my own name. You did all of that. I just read the mail you left at my address." What happened around that table next told me everything about who these people truly were. Carol reached for self-pity first. "We were only trying to help," she said, dabbing at dry eyes with her napkin. "And this is the thanks we get." Nobody at the table moved to comfort her. Megan stayed on her feet, furious, casting around for somewhere to put the blame. "This was your idea, too," she snapped at Daniel. "Don't you dare sit there like some kind of saint." And Daniel, my son, finally looked straight at me. His eyes were wet. His hands were shaking around the cold coffee cup. "I didn't think it would go this far, Mom," he said. For one breath, I saw the boy he had been. The one who used to fall asleep under this very table while Walter sanded the legs by lamplight. "But you let it go this far," I said. "You signed the loan. You let her hide my glasses. You let them tell a room full of people I was a stranger to my own mind, because that was easier than admitting you were drowning." "I was going to lose everything," he whispered. "You still might," I said, "but not my house and not me." He did not apologize. Not truly. He said he was sorry the way a man is sorry that he got caught, and I had lived long enough to know the exact difference between the two. Nobody at that table said the one true thing. Nobody said, "We were wrong." They said it had gone too far. They said they had meant well. They said, "How could you do this to family?" I let them say all of it. Then I stood up at the head of Walter's oak table, and I brought the evening to an end. "Here's what happens now," I said. I'll say it once, and I'll say it plainly, so there's no confusion about my memory. The room was silent. For the first time all night, they were the ones waiting on me. The house belongs to a trust. Hannah is the beneficiary. Ruth is the trustee. Not one of you can touch it. Ruth spoke up then, cool and clear. "That's correct. The trust is irrevocable and properly recorded. I would advise everyone at this table to retain their own counsel. The Maple Ridge deposit is your loss," I went on. "The loan is your problem, and the file with the county stays open until I decide otherwise." Megan opened her mouth. I lifted one hand and she closed it again. "You came into my home to take it," I said. "You sat at the table my husband built with his own hands, and you called me a stranger to my own life. So here is my boundary, and it is not up for negotiation." I looked at each of them in turn. Carol, Daniel, Megan. "This is still my table," I said. "You'll be leaving it tonight." They left. Chairs scraped against the floor. Carol gathered up her wine. Megan snatched her leather folder and her useless deed off the table. Daniel paused a moment at the door, and I let him pause, and then I let him go out into the dark. The door closed behind them. Nell let out a long, slow breath. Hannah was still crying quietly, and I sat back down at the head of my own table, in my own house, with my mind perfectly clear. The fallout came exactly the way I had added it up. The $2,000 Maple Ridge deposit was non-refundable. Megan ate that loss to the penny. The listing agreement died the moment the broker pulled the title and saw the trust sitting on it. There was a cancellation fee buried in the fine print. Daniel and Megan owed it. The $90,000 bridge loan was the worst of it. The lender confirmed the title in 2 days, exactly as Ruth had promised. With no house standing behind the loan, it came due as an unsecured debt, and $90,000 does not forgive itself. Daniel filed for bankruptcy that spring. The marriage did not survive it. Megan was gone by summer, and I will not pretend I lost sleep over the silence where she used to be. The county kept its file open. When the investigator asked whether I wanted to push the matter, I told her to let it rest. Not because they deserved the mercy, but because Hannah asked me to, and Hannah had earned the right to ask. Carol stopped coming around entirely. I heard she told her bridge club that I had turned cold in my old age. She wasn't entirely wrong. I had turned. Not cold, though, more like settled. The way concrete settles, into the exact shape you poured it. And Hannah? Hannah moved into the little apartment over my garage that fall to be close while she finished school. The house will be hers one day, but not for a good long while yet. I have plans for it first. These days, the oak table is loud again, the good kind of loud. Hannah studies at it most nights, her textbooks spread out across the very spot where the deed once sat. I do the crossword across from her. My reading glasses stay right where I leave them, beside the fruit bowl, and they have not gone missing one single time since. On Sundays, we cook together. She tells me about her patients. I tell her about Walter, about the storm that brought down the oak and the long winter he spent turning it into a table. Some evenings I catch her watching me, and I know what she's thinking, because one night over the dishes, she finally asked, "Grandma," she said, "how long did you know?" "Long enough," I told her, "long enough to read everything twice." She laughed. Then she got quiet. "I'm sorry they did that to you," she said. "Don't be," I said. "They taught me something useful." "What?" I dried my hands on the dish towel and looked around the kitchen Walter built, at the table that has held our whole life, at the girl who had never once asked me for any part of it. "That a quiet woman," I said, "is not the same thing as an empty house." They thought a forgetful old woman would sign whatever they put in front of her, and they were right about every single part of that sentence, except the forgetful part. That's my story. If it reminded you to ask where your own deed is, or who can sign in your name, do it this week. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.